This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to downrigger@montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Thank you very much, Manny. And as he just said, I am Downrigger Dale, and you have found the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. Hey, before we get going, I just wanted to remind you to share the podcast with your friends and family. That means a lot to us, and it helps us just grow more and be able to keep doing all this. Special shout out and thank you to our active military. So many of you around the world listen to us, and we're very honored that you take your time off to be able to listen to us here. And as I always say to you men and women that are out there serving, I hope this podcast brings a little bit of home to you while you're out there serving our country and protecting us. So thank you very much. Now today, I want to continue our series that we've been doing with different guides around the state of Montana and talking about the whole idea of getting out of your comfort zone and exploring some more different waterways that are around Montana. You know, so often we kind of get in that rut where we go, okay, I know these two reservoirs I fish all the time, or these two stretches of river I fish, and you know, I know where they're at, I know all that, so that's where you just keep going, because to get out and try to find fish in a whole new water body in that, well, gee, that's going to take time, and you only got a weekend or something. But there are ways around that, and what you're going to end up doing when you decide to get and broaden your world a little bit, what you end up having is now a whole new fishing spot, a whole new place to go. So that's why we do this series. And the best way, and I've said this so many times, the best way that you want to discover a water body is hire a guide. You hire that guide for a day, maybe 2 days, but at least a day. You go out with them, because guides are more than just, you know, taking you out for a good time of fishing. They are probably the best teachers you're ever going to find to learn a waterway. Everything from where the species you want to target are at, to also just new techniques, new things that are out there, because these guys and gals are doing it day in, day out. They are always researching new ideas and new things. So that's why we want to talk. And I'm going to bring on a great guide and a good friend, and also a great businessman. Scott Collinsworth and his wife Jess have been owning and running the marina at Fort Peck for a long time now, and Scott has been guiding as well. The guy wears a lot of hats, folks. He has done a heck of a job in guiding a lot of different species. When you go to Fort Peck, of course, that's the largest body of water in the state of Montana with a lot of different species. So you got a lot of choices. And this is a guy that pretty much knows every inch of that 134 miles of water. So, and if he doesn't, he'll find it out about it. So, Scott, welcome to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Thanks so much for coming in and joining us. And also, I have with me our good buddy, the captain of the Montana Outdoor Radio Show. Every now and then I'm able to get the captain to come on with me. And in fact, this time I actually went to Fort Peck. So we're doing the show right from the Fort Peck in the Montana Outdoor Radio Show Fort Peck headquarters. And Captain, thanks for coming on the podcast with us.
Well, I didn't realize you're going to put me to work, or else I wouldn't have invited you over.
Yeah, I got to put you to work now and then.
I'm looking forward to chatting with Scott. He knows what's going on, and I see him about every day when I put my boat, and I always get a report from him, and walleyes, bass, and salmon. I mean, I tell you what, we have a great time talking about salmon, and it's amazing how many different flashers that the salmon are attracted to, because it seems like there's a different one every day I go there, and he does a good job of giving information, honest information, to the folks out there.
Well, and we're going to get into, as the podcast goes along, we're actually going to get into some tips on how to find these fish and how to catch them, not just the king salmon that are swimming around Fort Peck, but also we've got walleye in there, we've got lake trout, we've got bass, all kinds of stuff. So we'll get into all that. But I first wanted you folks to get to know Scott a little bit and find out what he's all about. So Scott, let's talk a little bit about you. You've been owning Fort Peck Marina now for a while, you and Jess, but where did you come from and how did you get into this whole fishing business?
All right. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you guys for having me on the show, and thanks to everybody for tuning in and supporting the podcast. And I guess to move into that, we can talk about me a little bit. So I grew up in Anaconda, Montana, born and raised. Really didn't feel that we would ever leave Anaconda. But we decided we wanted to try to go after owning our own business, and we were looking at different marinas. The thing for us was we looked all over Minnesota. We looked all over North Dakota. That's where the majority of the marinas are for sale. You know, in Montana, there's really not a lot of options, you know. And we looked at a few here and there, really didn't care for, you know, what it all had to offer. So we kind of gave up on it. Then all of a sudden the Fort Peck Marina came available due to some hard times. And we decided to take a shot at it. And that's what we kind of decided. If there was ever a place in Montana we wanted to be, it was on Fort Peck. And to me, I feel it's the best lake in Montana. I believe I started fishing Fort Peck when I was about 18 years old. And so I put a lot of miles on trucks. You know, we would fish Canyon Ferry a lot. You know, Holter, Hauser, absolutely loved those lakes. Loved Thompson Falls up around Noxon. But just the diversity of the fishery on Fort Peck and the size of the fish and the challenge. I don't care what anybody says. Fort Peck's probably the biggest challenging lake in Montana to be consistent on. So that kind of drew me to that lake. That's why we came back every year so many times. And I'll be honest, when I first started fishing Fort Peck after about 3 years, I almost quit. Yeah, it was one of those things, you know, we used to fish.
It can frustrate you. Yeah.
Absolutely frustrating, you know, and it still does to this day. It's a very frustrating body of water. One day can be absolutely exceptional, and the next day you're wondering if every fish left the lake. But that's always been the draw for us.
What did you do before you became a marina owner? What line of work were you in?
So I actually worked in a chemical plant.
Oh.
Yeah, so I was there for 19 and a half years. It was a great job. When I first started, we were owned by Komatsu. We produced silane gas, which in turn, we grew polysilicon and also loaded the gas into cylinders and tonners, and it was shipped around the world. 75% of our market was the Asian market. So pretty cool job. It provided a great life for us as a family and kind of set us up for taking our next step in this adventure.
So this was a big gear change for you then.
Huge.
And being a marina owner, I had another good friend for a long time that ran a marina up on Flathead Lake, and that's a lot of work. Did you realize how much work you were going to be getting into when you bought Fort Peck Marina? No,
we knew it would be challenging and a lot of work going into it, and we thought we were geared up for it. But what people don't realize, it's definitely 24/7. You know, it's amazing the amount of work that goes in to keep that place operational. And, you know, thank goodness I have a rock star for a wife that keeps things rolling for us.
Yeah, she runs a good ship there.
If it wasn't for her, we would not be doing as good as we're doing. She holds that place together like you can't imagine.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about Fort Peck Marina. Now, when I talk about Fort Peck, this is a huge body of water. It's, about 134 miles, something like that. Yes. And so you would think, okay, there's probably a lot of marinas on Fort Peck. There's not.
No.
There's, you're kind of it, aren't you?
Well, we're the biggest marina on Fort Peck. There's 4 marinas. Crooked Creek starts, which is about 99 miles west of us.
Yeah.
Right now they don't have enough water, so they're actually shut down. They're fighting some pretty hard times down there. You know, they've got a lot of silt where the base silted in, low water years. So they're kind of fighting some tough issues that hopefully will get resolved, because that's a great place down there. Hell Creek Marina is another great marina.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun over there.
Yep. I've had a lot of good times. We used to go down, long before we owned this place, and stayed a lot with Clint and Debbie, and spent a lot of time in Hill Creek. And then Rock Creek Marina is under new ownership now, and they're really doing some
that's
good.
right, yeah.
Yeah, they're doing some great changes down there. They're fixing the place up. They're doing some additions, and so it's nice. We only have 3 operating marinas on such a huge body of water, but they're all doing pretty good right now.
Mm-hmm. And Fort Peck Marina obviously is right next to the town of Fort Peck, thus the name. But it is a much larger operation. It's got the paved ramps, all the goodies. Plus, you've got a very, very nice tackle shop in there, kind of a convenience store as well, and then a great bar and restaurant that's got some fantastic food and some good beer, and
some ice cold beer.
Yeah,
you can't go without that after a day of fishing.
Well, and what I love about the bar there is, at the end of the day, you get in there and here's all these fishermen at the end of the day, and they're all around, and you start sharing stories and boy, you hear some of the best stories, or the one that got away and all that stuff. And there's probably a few lies being told.
They're fishermen. I don't know if there's any lies involved with those.
And then you guys have a large campground too.
Yes. Yeah.
How many slots do you guys have there?
So we have 47 RV spots, which we're really hoping to add 13 more. It's getting busy enough up here now. I think it definitely warrants, adding more camping spots. We've been talking about it since we purchased the marina, but we're still trying to get the cabins. We do have approval. It's just some logistics that we're trying to work through to get those built, which that'll add a lot to the marina as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, and you guys have, in addition to that, all those services, you decided, okay, and I don't know how you find the time to do this, but I'm going to go out and guide. And you have become really one of the top guides in the whole state of Montana. I constantly get reports from other people saying, wow, that was an incredible day with Scott Collingsworth. Tell us what made you decide to take on that, because that's a big responsibility on a huge piece of water that can be very challenging just from wind and other things. What made you decide, okay, I'm gonna be a fishing guide too?
Well, growing up with the father I had, he always wanted to try to help people, and he instilled that in me at a very young age. And he had me in the outdoors from the time I was 3 years old. I was with him constantly, and I watched him help people, and it's just kind of how I grew up. And when we started talking about owning a marina somewhere, honestly, it's been my dream to be a guide, just to help people. And nothing makes my day better than somebody catching the fish of a lifetime, or even a small fish, but just seeing that smile on somebody's face, knowing that I can help pass that on and help teach people to get better at what they're doing, and hopefully, take that with them and keep building, so they become a better fisherman.
Well, and you're a good teacher. I've watched you in seminars that you've conducted, and then just watching you out with your clients and that. Now, folks, when you found this podcast, there's a podcast description. And down towards the bottom of that podcast description, you'll see a headline that says links. And I'm going to put links to Scott's website, the Fort Peck Marina website. On that site, you can also, can they book sessions with you as far as going out guiding? Can they do that on the website?
We haven't done an online booking option yet, because I personally like to talk to every individual, and sometimes it's really hard for me because we have so much going, and I do have people that get upset because I don't get back to them right away. Mm-hmm. But it's really hard.
I found that to be a problem.
yes, I know. And but my thing is, I never want a mistake where I end up having a double booking or something.
Sure.
So I still am the old school. I have a calendar book that I make sure I write down, and I like to have information from people. I like to make sure, what species we're going to target, what their main species is, and then, secondary stuff depending on how weather and everything is. And I'm probably one of the different guides you're ever going to meet on not only Fort Peck, but probably around that. We don't keep any of the big fish. the big walleyes especially, and even a lot of the big northerns and stuff, and I guess I've always wanted to pass that on and make sure that our future generations have nothing to worry about and make sure the fisheries stay healthy. And I'm all about keeping fish because there's one reason we all fish for walleye, especially, is we love to eat them.
Yeah.
We
Best
absolutely
eating fish in the water. Yeah.
So it's not that we don't keep fish. We try the selective harvest. And I have that conversation up front with most of not most, all of the clients I have before I book. And in 5 years, the amount of trips I've guided has been, astronomical of what I thought I would do. And I've only had 2 people not book because the majority of the people that come to Fort Peck are here for one reason. They don't want numbers of fish. They want, big 30-inch walleyes, and if you talk to them about it, they're great about it. They want to come, they want to catch fish. They want a picture. They want to have a replica made. To me, that's what it's about, and that probably warms my heart and puts a smile on my face bigger than anything is watching those big fish go back to where they belong.
Well, yeah. And then, they're going to pass those traits on to their young and all that. The other thing, though, if it was a state record kind of fish or that, then that's a different story.
That's a different story, correct?
Right.
Yes.
But also, for folks listening, if you got a fish and you say, wow, I want that one on the wall, the replicas, in my opinion, actually come out better.
They do.
Than a natural mount.
Right.
They especially as the years go by, a natural one gets kind of nasty hanging on the wall, whereas the replicas really do, and it is your fish. You photographed it, you've measured it, and all that. So, just to let you know that's out there. Now, let's talk about that booking process and what kind of take us through if I was going to book a trip and call you, what we go through before we even get out on the water, and then we'll talk a bit about going out and finding those fish.
Yes. So, usually, we have that conversation, depending on the species of fish we want to target. We'll talk about, gear, tackle, which everything's provided, by me, of course, bait, everything. Our clients, the only thing they need to bring is just food and drinks.
Okay.
And the appropriate clothing. And then, of course, have a Montana valid fishing license for that day. And everything else is provided by us.
Okay. So then do you go over with them, okay, what kind of fish do you want to target, that sort of stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then at that point, then you kind of plotted out of, okay, well, they want smallmouth bass or walleye or whatever. Right. Then at that point, you've kind of figured out where you're going to take them and all that.
Yep.
Now, what kind of instruction do you give them, once you get to your first stop? Because, this is a huge lake, folks. And so, he's going to take you to the best spots that he's got. But then for, let's say, somebody that's never fished Fort Peck and maybe has picked a species they want to learn about. So do you give some instruction about, the technique to use and all that?
Definitely. Yeah. Usually, we'll talk about it. And if people are still a little bit confused, I'll give some instruction, and show people. That's another thing that I'm probably a little bit different than most guides. I don't fish during the day. A lot of guys do, and I'm not bad mouthing them at all. That's, their objective. But to me, it's their trip, and that would really crush me if, say I caught a 30-inch walleye and they net it for me. To me, that just doesn't make sense. They're paying for the trip. I do grab a rod once in a while just for, like you said, the instruction side of the world, because sometimes you can explain stuff to people, but they don't really understand it unless they can physically see it. But my goal is not only is to get those clients on good fish and have fun, but I want them to learn. I want them to get better at what they're doing, because that's the goal of this is they can take that and keep building on it and move on their own and get better.
Mm-hmm. So let's take, for example, walleye, because Fort Peck is, if you read some of the top fishing magazines and that, it's ranked in the top 5 of the world for the best walleye lake out there.
Yes.
So, if someone hasn't fished for walleye before, take us through what you're going to tell them and what's the technique. And by the way, you've got quite a touch because you've done pretty well in a lot of these big tournaments too. So talk a little bit about how you fish for a walleye.
So, it just really depends on time of year. This early season is a lot of jig fishing. we throw a lot of plastics in Fort Peck. This year's been a little bit different for us. It's been a really, really big minnow bite this year. And it's hard. That is one technique. If you have people in your boat that you're guiding, that aren't proficient fishermen, that they really struggle with. It's a real subtle bite a lot of times. And that's really hard to do. So you kind of got to almost take, your clients and just kind of understand where they're at, and then almost tailor your day around them as well. Because if they go out, I want them to learn, but I also want them to have fun.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when we're doing that, we might put a Lindy rig out with a minnow. That gives us a couple more options that we're going to pick up some bonus fish, is what I call them. And then I'll spend time trying to get them to understand how to jig, and the proper techniques and the good cadences, and the hard part on Fort Peck that we all know is that changes day to day. So almost every day you go out, it might be a different type of bite.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, I want to talk about the jigging technique, because that's something that's fairly new to me. I learned walleye fishing from the captain here, and it was, mainly bottom bouncers, mostly trolling stuff. So the jig thing is still kind of new to me, and it takes a certain touch. So I want you to talk a bit about what that touch is, what that feel is, and that when we come back right after this. I want to talk a bit about a very special company located in western Montana, Superior Hardwoods of Montana. They were established in 1977, and since that time, guiding customers through the woods has been their passion throughout their history. The main focus at Superior Hardwoods of Montana has been to provide the finest wide plank flooring and unique building materials available anywhere. One of the things I noticed right away about the owner of Superior Hardwoods of Montana, John Medliger, and his son Corey, and the rest of the staff there is they're very proud to offer the largest selection of in-stock flooring in the western United States. See, for over 40 years, they've been known for leading the industry in reclaimed and antique building materials, and the success that followed has allowed them to, now get this, stock over 11 acres of stunning architectural lumber that awaits the perfect addition to your home. One thing I want you to remember is just because they're located in Missoula, Montana, that does not mean they can't help you turn your home into a piece of historical art if you live somewhere else. They have been guiding folks from as far away as Hawaii and beyond through the woods for many years. So no matter if your project is located across the street from them, across the state, or somewhere else in the world, they can't wait to turn your house into a dream home. Their goal is simple. They stand ready to deliver the best choices with reliability and honesty, helping at any phase of a project with inspirational advice. And I'm not exaggerating when I say they actually treat their customers as friends and family. So the choice is yours. But if I were you, I would go to superior-hardwoods.com. superior-hardwoods.com. Of course, you're more than welcome to call them, 406-235-7452, or, they'd love you to visit 5120 Highway 93 just south of Missoula, Montana. They can't wait to guide you through the woods at Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Go see them. You're going to love what they do to your home. We are back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast, and with Scott Collingsworth, the captain of the Montana Outdoor Radio Show, who's been oddly quiet so far, but I'm sure he's going to chime in soon, especially when we start talking about these jigging techniques. But the captain of the Montana Outdoor Radio Show is with us as well. Now, let's talk jigging, Scott. And this is an interesting touch. I'm still kind of learning and working this thing. So talk about, okay, we're going to cast out. Now, talk about what that retrieve is like.
Okay. Well, and my favorite cadence where I typically start my day, if we're throwing minnows like we have been a lot this year, you really got to slow your presentation down. The cast you can't rip it because, of course, the minnow, you're going to lose it. They're a little harder to keep on the hook.
Boy, they are, yeah.
And that's one thing I think that I really enjoy throwing plastics, because I feel in a day I can probably make another 150 casts.
Yeah.
And you
Without
can
a doubt.
contact that many more fish. But it just hasn't been a good plastic bite this year for us. So really slow down. And so when we cast at fish, we'll let that jig hit the bottom. Mm-hmm. And then for us, it's been a real slow, rod tip to the water, a real slow lift up, probably come up almost to a 90 degrees, and then let that jig fall back to the bottom slow.
So it's just a slow pickup. Yep. Let it go back to the bottom. Yes. Okay. Now, how deep typically are you when you're jigging for these walleye?
Well, it's been a little bit different year for that as well. Typically after, the fish spawn, they slide out deep for a little while. They get out on that deep structure, and then they come back up shallow and kind of put the feed bag on. But this year, I don't know if we're fighting the fact that we really haven't had a lot of spot tail shiners in the reservoir for the last 4 years due to the low water. We're starting to see a good population of perch come back, which I don't understand why a lot more of those walleyes aren't up in the weeds and up in the salt cedars chasing perch. They're there a little bit, but most of our fish have stayed in that 20 to 30, 35 feet of water all spring. So, and that's a challenge in itself. If you're throwing a 1/4 ounce or a 3/8 ounce jig up in, 10 foot or less, that jig gets to the bottom fast. But to throw that jig in 30 feet of water, especially with a good sized minnow, it takes a long time for that jig to get to the bottom.
First of all, I appreciate Scott making, it very comfortable for his people that come on his boat. I try to do the same thing, even though I'm not a guide. Like, for example, when Downrigger's here, I take my hearing aids out, so I can't hear him at all, and that seems to work very, very well. He talks a lot when he's on the boat, and I don't do a lot of talking, just like this podcast where he's got his back to me. If the folks could see this, He's got his back to me, and he wonders why I haven't chimed in.
Yeah, I kind of prefer it that way. But, I always know when he shuts his hearing aids off, because no matter what I say to him, he'll just go, "Oh, I'll be darned."
So, and I want to make a note on the marina. It is amazing to me. A husband and wife are working together side by side. And I've talked to some marina owners, and they said, I bought this marina because I wanted to go fishing. And Scott actually accomplished that by being a guide. But the only reason that he's able to do that is because he got Jess. And I'll say this about Jess. If I can just get one smile out of her when I see her in the morning, when I go have breakfast on Saturday or Sunday, then it makes my day. Now, that doesn't happen very often. And so she actually makes the largest pancakes I have ever seen. The plates are regular size plates, and the pancakes droop over. So if you like pancakes, or if you like anything, a really old-fashioned breakfast that'll fill you up, you need to go to the marina on Saturday and Sunday. I begged her to be open on Memorial Day on Monday morning, but she said no. I'm taking it off. So let's get back to talking about these jigs. Scott, two questions. How do you hook a minnow? We had an argument yesterday on that.
Yeah.
How do you hook a minnow on a jig? That's the first question.
Okay.
The second one is, how do you determine what size of jig to use?
Okay, so the first question on the size of the minnow, or how to hook a minnow, is what I do when I'm pitching minnows is I actually go in the mouth and I come out right at the back of the head where there's a little more bone to hold on. For me, what I've learned over the years is fresh dead is every bit as good as alive and wiggling. It's the scent. When you're jigging and stuff and you're moving that bait, it doesn't need that. Now, if we're fishing a dead rod right out of the side of the boat, which we typically are doing, then I will lip hook that minnow so it's getting its own action, and it's swimming and moving around a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever put in the back of its dorsal fin, you hooked it there? Because I've done that a couple of times.
Sure.
But the problem is that minnow, and if it's a larger minnow, will move around a lot. And so you never know if you're getting a bite or not, because that thing's bouncing. And there's some theory there that maybe it's too lively for a fish, and so that's interesting. And now I'll hook it in the back tail.
Yes,
sometimes.
I've done that as well. Yes.
And so the other way to keep that minnow on there, I've heard, is take a little bit of an old twister tail.
Yes.
And put that on the edge of the, if you're having problems keeping your minnows on, it's not a foolproof situation, but it does help a little bit.
It does, yes.
And you want to
especially if you're lip hooking those minnows, because they can come off so easy.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're correct. That definitely does work.
So you put it on the minnow first, and then take just that little piece of rubber or plastic, whatever it is, and just squeeze it on there next to the minnow, and
Yes.
it holds it on.
Yeah.
Okay.
size of jigs. How's he determine that?
How big a jig would you typically use if you're going to go out fishing for walleye?
So my theory on jig size has changed a whole lot in the last 3 years, and that has been primarily due to the forward-facing sonar. We're starting to understand fish behavior a lot better. There's a few pretty accomplished fishermen on this reservoir that we've had some pretty good talks about this, and one of the things that's become, one of the best jig baits, in the last 5 or 6 years, that's really coming along, of course, they're the glide baits, the shiver minnows, the Rapala, jig and wraps, the rip and glides from Walleye Nation Creation. And there's some more out there, but those are the three primarily baits we use. And they all have different fall rates. But what we're seeing with those 3/4 and 1 ounce glide baits is we're getting a reaction bite out of those fish, flat out. That's exactly what they're doing. That fast fall rate some days, especially when you're fishing the deeper water, so we started actually doing something a little bit different, in the history of walleye fishing. Everybody always talked about the lightest jig you can throw, the slow fall rates. That's what we were looking for. Well, what we've learned is there's a lot of times if you're watching forward facing sonar, those fish are moving so fast, you have to get to those fish. By the time you throw a 1/4 ounce jig out there in 25 feet of water, when that thing gets to the bottom and gets in front of that fish, he could be 30 or 40 feet the other way by then. So we've actually been throwing in the deeper water a lot of 1/2 and 3/4 ounce jigs, and it's made a difference. And the bigger walleye don't seem to mind it. In fact, there's days I think that those bigger fish actually, it triggers them just like a glide bait with that fast fall rate.
Mm-hmm. What about rod size? What kind of rod size are you using?
So I fish nothing but Denali rods, and I throw actually a 5.9 medium, moderate, fast. And 5.9 is my favorite rod. That's for jigging. Mm-hmm. The glide baits, I definitely like to step up into a 6.6 or a 7 foot medium, moderate action. You get a little better control of that glide bait. They're heavier. You get a little better lift on them when you're popping them pretty hard.
Use a 5'9" rod. Wow.
Yeah, that's my favorite jigging rod out there. It's small, it's compact, it's super light. That way, when you're throwing all day, your arm doesn't get tired. I mean, my 5'9" rod paired with a Fluger 20 reel, it's amazing how light it is, and it seems like the feedback I get from those fish is just automatic. And the interesting thing is there's a great backbone in those rods, and that's actually what we jig lake trout with. It's kind of entertaining when we pull up to go lake trout fishing, and clients are like, "Well, where's the lake trout rods?" I'm like, "You're holding on to them." And they're like, "Oh, we've just been fishing walleye. We're fishing 8 or 10 pound braid is all, on a 5'9" rod." And
that's what I was going to ask you is what kind of line you're using. So you're using braided line, 8 or 10 pound.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes. And I'm that weird guy that I don't fish a lot of fluorocarbon. I've my entire life I've tied direct with braid. I don't think on Fort Peck with our water clarity it makes that much difference. I should say I've never been on a reservoir that I think it makes a big difference. I've got some good friends that are fluoro nuts, and I'm not saying they're wrong and I'm not saying I'm right. It's just what I believe in and what I've seen. And for me, the fluorocarbon adds another weak link in my setup that could potentially fail. The times I do use fluorocarbon where it comes in is on Fort Peck when the pike are going nuts. Mm-hmm. I'll put a 15 or 20 pound fluoro leader on, and then we don't lose near as many fish. I mean, it's amazing how fast those pike can bite through the braid.
God, yeah.
But they can't get through the fluoro near as easy. So I do use them, but it's not for, my fear of spooking fish. It's more of trying to hold on to the pike.
Let's talk about name brands on braid. You like Wind Tamer.
Yep. So Finn's braid, Wind Tamer is my favorite braid. I've been fishing that line for about 8 years now. and it's not a very well known name up here, but it's a Florida saltwater based company, and they make, I truly believe it's the most superior braided line on the market. I mean, I absolutely love it. Like I said, I don't fish anything else anymore.
Okay. And then how much leader off of the braid are you putting on? How
So
long?
if I'm running a leader, it's usually about 18 inches.
About 18 inches.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, another thing that people, especially that are new to jigging, is they want to cast as far as they can. I
Right.
mean, how important is that?
You know, it's really hard if you're making long casts, you know, you start getting out there at 100 to 120 feet, you know, you hit a fish, it's pretty hard to hold on to that fish, you know, and it just depends on the conditions. If it's real calm, you can get away with that. But if it's windy, it's really hard to detect bites.
But it's not really necessary.
It's
though,
not.
is it?
No.
Yeah.
To me, I like to position the boat where I can make about a 60 to 70, 80 foot cast max, you know, and then you're a little better control of that jig and you can get good feedback.
And I think that's where some people get intimidated with the whole jigging thing as well. I just can't cast very far.
Right.
Well,
You
not
don't
a
need to.
problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing that I've noticed with jigging is a mistake that I was making when I first started learning it is as you're getting to the end of your retrieve, you start speeding it up because you're ready to cast again. Well, that a lot of times that's when that fish will hit.
Yes.
Is right towards the end.
Definitely.
Why do you suppose that is? What?
Well, to me, it's almost like, okay, you pitch out and the fish follows you all the way back to the boat. Well, then when that bait gets almost vertical under the boat, you know, and instead of now most you're pulling kind of horizontal to the bottom, it's kind of hopping. Well, now all of a sudden on your retrieves, it's coming straight up and dropping right back in their face. And I think that's why they pick it up a little closer to the boat sometimes. It just acts a little bit different. It triggers that fish.
But yeah, so remember, folks, do your retrieve all the way, the same deal.
Yes.
Don't do that speed up thing at the end because you that's right when you could miss that great walleye.
It could be the fish of a lifetime.
So now when the walleye is going to come hit that, what is the person going to feel?
So it's typically a small tick or a thump, you know, and it's pretty amazing. On some of the hook sets, you'll feel just the slightest tick, and you're thinking it must have just been a little fish, and you'll set the hook, and it's like, oh my word, you know, you can tell immediately it's a big fish, but it's amazing how subtle some of those bites can be. So I tell my clients, and it's pretty much what my dad told me growing up, is hook sets are free. It doesn't matter what it is. If you think it's a bite, potentially, set the hook. It doesn't hurt anything.
And then how hard are you setting that hook?
I set the hook pretty hard.
So you're going to give it a good whack. Now, what about when you're jigging through the weeds and stuff, and the weeds are grabbing it a little and that? How do you distinguish weed to that's a walleye tick?
Right. It's really hard when you're fishing the weed beds and stuff, and you're definitely fishing the cabbage. It's almost, I mean, it's so tough.
So when in doubt, just set it anyway.
That's how I am. Yeah. If I have any inkling, I think it's a fish, it's going to get a hook set.
Okay. So that gives you a lot of great information about jigging. One last thing though, what about colors? Why do you pick, what colors are you using? Why are you picking certain colors over other colors?
You know, one of my go-to colors has really changed in the last 7 or 8 years, and I'm finding it to work on almost every body of water we fish. Any color, different color stained water, but it's white. White seems to be just an unbelievable color. And I don't know, at first I thought it was a water clarity thing, and first I thought it was, maybe, Cisco related on Fort Peck, but just about every reservoir that I go to now, we fish white a lot more. And I think we were really missing out back in the day. So I usually start with that, and then it just depends on water clarity, if it's, and the sun, on Fort Peck, especially if the sun's out, the metallic colors, anything that will sparkle, gold, silver, hammered brass, stuff like that, jig wise. If it's a little overcast, go with a little more subtle natural color, maybe a smaller silver or a duller silver color, maybe black.
Okay.
Things
Let's
of
talk
that
about
nature.
plastics a little bit, Scott. Now, one of the things that I'm sitting there fishing with minnows. I'm getting tired of replacing the minnows on.
Yes.
And so I switched to Gulp, and I put the
Yes.
Emerald Shiner on. What's your preference between Gulp and Power Bait? Because Gulp has got the scent.
Yes.
The Power Bait doesn't have a scent that I can tell.
Right.
And so is there any preference that you have in those two?
It just seems like different days, the fish want a different deal. It's kind of entertaining. A lot of people really discredit Gulp, but I'll tell you what, I've caught a lot of big fish in my life on Gulp, and I think it's one of the best baits out there. And we've had a lot of days where, it truly, for some reason, you're catching more fish with Gulp than you are with a live minnow. And it's just kind of astonishing to me, but it's proved itself. It's not 100%, but there's a lot of days we catch more fish with Gulp.
And what size Gulp and color and all that are you using?
I like 3-inch and definitely the 4-inch on Fort Peck, but Berkeley came out, I think it's been 2 years now, 2 years ago now, maybe last year, but with that blue shiner pattern.
Okay.
And on Fort Peck, that color is incredible. And then also the white. Those are probably my two favorite. Before that was probably the watermelon pearl. That's always been a really good color for me. It's a little more natural, darker with a silver bottom, but
I don't notice that you have those in your boat, Captain.
Well, it's surprising you don't, because you look through everything when you get in my boat.
well, if that's the case, Captain, I've got a whole rack of them.
Thank
When
you.
Stop through. I'll
be
get you
right down.
Yes.
In fact, I'm going to actually buy him a trip with you, and you can experience what I go through. So I'll tell you,
The price just went up.
I'll tell you this though, that anybody that says that the fish don't bite that Gulp, when I get bit after I've been doing minnows, when I get bit on that Emerald Shiner, that Gulp,
Yes.
I mean they slam it. I mean it's like boom, boom, wow. And so there's something in that scent, or there's something in that,
I agree. And I find that with plastics more too. That's one thing that I really like, fishing plastics, because usually if you get a fish to commit, there's no question. And it's, they just chomp it. It's down the throat. Minnows, they pick them up, they mouth them, it's a little more subtle. And I agree, when they hit Gulp or plastics, it's a rod rip.
Do you ever tip it with a piece of night crawler or a minnow?
I have.
Your plastic?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I don't do it a lot, but we definitely do when they get in this little bit of a funk like they've been this year.
Yeah. Okay.
So, why wouldn't someone just always use like Gulp and that as opposed to a minnow?
We always start out when I start a day with clients, or even if we're trying to pre-fish and break down a body of water and we're jigging, we always start out one guy throwing live bait and one guy throwing plastics and Gulp and stuff. And that way, that's one thing
Good
I think
idea.
people really struggle with is, they get stuck in a rut. They think, well, this worked yesterday and that worked yesterday, and last week it was this. The thing is the fish change their attitude, they change their mood, and to be consistent, you have to give the fish what they want. That's what I tell people. If they're hitting plastics that day, I put everybody in the boat on them, but you got to let the fish tell you what they need for the day. I mean, they're changing, and you got to move with them.
Well, we're going to take another quick break here. And when we come back, we're going to shift gears a little bit, talk about some other species, and we're going to talk about one of the Captain and I's favorite, and that's those big king salmon.
Oh, there's nothing better.
Because before we know it, that's going to be coming up on Fort Peck. So we'll get into that and a whole lot more with Scott Collinsworth right after this. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer are proud authorized dealers of some of the most highly revered brands in the world, like Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer has an unparalleled selection of cargo, utility, and dump trailers, and they still have a good selection of Boss snowplows as well. But the gang at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer knows that it takes much more than filling a lot with great inventory to be a company that folks can depend on. That's why they vowed to become the true experts in everything they sell. That's why they set their goals high, and I mean high. They can and will help you before the sale by finding you what you need to get the job that is in front of you done. Whether it is a new CM truck bed for the back of your truck or the perfect Boss snowplow for the front of it. Or maybe you need the Diamond C dump trailer to finally tackle that mess behind the barn you vowed you would get done once the snow cleared. The folks at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer will not only find the perfect equipment to get those and about any other job done, they'll help you with financing, teach you everything you need to know about how to use that equipment, and will continue to be there for you when you need parts or full service. Bottom line is this: Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer is your locally owned Boss snowplow, CM truck bed, and Diamond C dealer. They offer a wide variety of auto, truck, and trailer accessories and specialize in sales and service of trailers. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer is located at 5680 Expressway. That's right in Missoula, Montana. You can also go see them on the web. That's rmtte.com. Sure, they'd love it if you came by, but feel free to find them whichever way you want. Just remember, when something needs to be hauled somewhere, there's no better place to start than Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. That's rmtte.com. Go see them. And we are back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. And before we get into these king salmon, I want to mention a little bit about Visit Montana. This is something that, you think, well, wait a minute, Downrigger, I live in Montana. There's so much of this state that you haven't even discovered yet. I can't believe how many times I've talked to people and said, have you ever been over to Yellowstone lately? I haven't been to Yellowstone Park in my life, or I haven't been to Glacier Park in my life, and they've lived here their whole life. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Share this not only with your friends and that, but especially those that live outside the state. Give them some ideas of things to do. In Montana, discover a land where adventure roams free. Explore small towns where every corner tells a story and every greeting comes with a smile. Saddle up for breathtaking horseback rides or catch a fish in a crystal clear lake. Spend your evenings sharing stories around the campfire under a starlit sky. That's how you Montana. Plan your trip at visitmt.com. That's visitmt.com. All right, Scott, now let's talk about these king salmon. One thing, when I talk about king salmon in Montana, especially for people that aren't from here or maybe just moved here, and they go, you don't have king salmon in Montana. Well, yes, we do.
Yes.
They've been here for a while, and I've done several podcasts on this because people want to learn about them and that. When is the best time to fish for kings in Fort Peck? And then does that just get crazy for guiding?
Oh, it gets absolutely insane for guiding. The blackjaw fever is caught on in the state of Montana, like we can't imagine. It's been, the last couple of years have been absolutely amazing. I think we're going into another season that's going to be very good with the catches we're seeing early. That indicates that there's a lot
already catching them.
Yeah, and big fish too. You know, Randy just caught a 20-pound king. I just heard
Randy
of another.
Vivas,
I heard of another 18-pounder that just got caught. Multiple 14 and 15s, and imagine what those fish are going to be like in August. And,
oh my goodness!
And everything is indicating right now that we're going to have probably. I wouldn't say another 2016 season, but we're going to have one that's probably the best since 2016 from what it's looking like.
That's big. Now, so let's talk a bit about these fish. These are a true king salmon. Everything we just talked about with walleye, forget about that.
Yes,
for this. What is the technique for fishing for king salmon? That's a total trolling thing, right?
It is. Some guys I've had, we've tried the jig bite, and you do get one occasionally here and there, but consistency is just not there. So 99% of it is a trolling bite. Downriggers, dipsy divers, We've Slayer kind of opened the world up to, trolling copper and weighted steel and slide divers. And it's been amazing just the progression we've seen in the last 3 years. And the cool part is we have a really good group of guys that are willing to help each other out, and try to understand these fish the best we can. Salmon fishing on Fort Peck's always been good, and people have been drawn to it, but it's really starting to catch on. And, it's nice to see a group of guys come together and help each other so that we can get better at what we do.
And talk about a fish that is tough to figure out. One thing I'll tell you, when you book a trip with Scott, you're going to have days where you're not going to be on fire. This is a hunt.
Yes,
and that's
it's a grind.
If you understand that, that's really kind of half of the fun is figuring these critters out. So talk about that. What are you putting out first? To try, because I mean it's a hunt.
It is.
So talk about what's on the rods and what you use.
Okay. So last year we did some different stuff, like I said, with Slayer kind of opening the world up to some of the other.
We're talking about Bill Zarodka, which we call the Salmon Slayer. And I've done a few podcasts. In fact, one of the more popular podcasts we actually did the podcast from his boat. And that was
caught fish during the podcast.
And caught right during it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was wild, yeah.
Well, he's kind of the pioneer. There's no doubt that Bill is the best salmon fisherman on this lake. He is, and he's helped me out tremendously, and I appreciate all the help he's given me to try to get me better at this game. And I love learning about him. It's fast becoming my favorite fish in Fort Peck to target. I mean, it's amazing to me just how cool these fish are. And like you're saying, they're hard to catch. Mm-hmm. You go out one day and you have a phenomenal day. And to me, I relate it back to walleye fishing. That's why I got so hooked on walleye. And you go out the next day and it's like, man, everything you do is wrong. Mm-hmm. One day they're on a blue pattern, the next day they're on green or glow white, or, they change, and I think a lot of that has to do with the light quality, cause they're down 60, 70, 80 feet, 100 feet, and the light infractions in the water column definitely change. And we're learning more and more about them. It sounds like, their eyes start changing the older they get into August, and such. So it definitely is a definitely changing color and different presentations.
Mm-hmm. And some of the changes that have happened over the years, I've been fishing these things since the late 90s, is size of flasher.
Yes.
We used to just use 11-inch flasher. Yes. Now we use 8-inch flashers sometimes. Yes. And that works different. And flies. We never had flies back then. We had the Gene Moore Special, which was a squid.
Yeah.
That we used to use. And then Brad's cut bait.
Yes.
Where you fill those up. Now, those are the three basic ones, and more so with the flies right now. These guys, Randy Beavis, has flies. And our buddy Gary Reeb has ties flies.
Neil Cote is doing salmon flies now as well for Kings, and I just did a podcast with him and talked a little bit about that.
Nice.
So what colors are you looking for? We'll start with the flies here since we're on that. What colors are the keys to stimulating these salmon?
So my probably 4 prominent colors that we use a lot are the blues, green, white, and a purple. Some days purple really does good in this water column. Okay.
How about you, Captain? What's your favorite color fly?
Anyone that's going to catch a salmon.
Okay. Here we
go.
And
I really don't. I don't. I just, it's like, kind of like a grab bag. As Scott said, we have a pretty good network of guys that if they catch something, hey, we want to know 2 or 3 things. You want to know how deep, what color flasher, and what color, or what were you using for bait. And then I'll usually put 1 rod. I fish with 4 rods, so I'll put 1 rod with whatever they duplicated. Yep. And I need to know the depth, because last year, if you remember, we were talking to Dick Gondiero and Dick Jr., and they're catching fish in 55 feet of water. And we were fishing in 70 to 85 feet of water. So I said, Rigger, bring that downrigger up. Yep. Brought it up, and it wasn't 5 minutes. Boom. We got a salmon. Well, the other side note I do want to say, don't worry about buying any salmon gear before you get here, because these Scott and Eddie have the best selection between the West Coast and the East Coast.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I want to really caution you folks that have never fished the salmon on Fort Peck, and maybe you're used to going out maybe over to Seattle or whatever and fishing the ocean, or maybe you've tried it on the Great Lakes. There is a difference because these salmon are keying mainly on the Cisco and that. So bringing that ocean gear and stuff may not really help you. The other thing also is if you're going to come try these kings, I cannot stress this enough. Hire a guide like Scott. You really need to do that. Otherwise, you're going to get so frustrated and you're never going to come try it again. You really need to have a guide because they're going to be able to get you to the right place and then get you all the right instruction and show you the gear. They're going to provide the gear. Now you can see what's going on and using. It'll be the best investment you've ever made if you want to learn to fish these fish. Because otherwise, you're just going to go nuts. You're going to spend a fortune on trying all this stuff. And, every magazine tries to sell you some crap. And really, when you go to the Fort Peck Marina and go into Scott's tackle shop, he's got on there what's working. That or they wouldn't sell it.
Right.
So because he's a guide, he's fishing for it. So that those are some of the keys. Just don't try to teach yourself on this, because I would hate for you to get soured on it and never get that thrill and the fun of catching these big fish. So now you're using downriggers. You've got these big flashers on. What kind of line are you putting on these? And these are bigger, heavier rods, right?
They are. They definitely are. Yeah, they're 9-foot, medium light action rods on the downriggers. And as we step out, to the planer boards and the dipsy divers, and the weighted steel, of course, we have a different rod for all of that gear. They get heavier. But primarily on all of my trolling rods, I run 50-pound Power Pro.
Okay.
When I first started fishing these things, we were fishing 20 to 25 pound, which I think is okay on a downrigger. I don't think you have a lot of problem there, but when we started fishing these dipsy divers, pulling these big baits, these big Magnum divers, your rods are so stressed out. You've got to crank that drag down so hard so it doesn't pull line out, that when, a big king hits, there's nothing left, and they're just so powerful. We were breaking fish off, and there's days, like we said, you don't know if you're going to get one bite that day, no bites, but to put that time in and lose a fish is heartbreaking. So I upsize everything to 50 to 60 pound test, and that definitely has helped land fish.
Mm-hmm. So then you've got your spread of rods out there, depending on how many people you've got on the boat. Typically, you're running 4 or 5 rods then, or
well, last year there was days we actually ran 8.
Really?
Yeah, up to 8
that's
rods.
A lot of rods.
It is, and one of my goals this year that it didn't pan out for me is like we talked about, like what we're saying about hiring a guide is, the guys on the Great Lakes have been doing this for a lot of years, and they are very good at what they do. And my goal was to fly back this spring during their spring bite and fish with 3 different captains back there and understand how they're running 14 rods,
Wow.
and they catch so many fish. It's not even funny.
14 rods.
Yeah, there's days I have trouble keeping track of 6. So I really wanted to go back and see their program and learn, because, as a guide, I want to learn as much as I can as well to help pass that information on to the clients, because, that's what it's about.
Sure.
And so hopefully next year I can make that happen. But yeah, to me, I just watch those guys in amazement when they're running 14 rods and they're just killing it out there.
Mm-hmm.
And for somebody who hasn't fished Fort Peck for salmon and you come over and start fishing, one of the things that if you're going to use planer boards, don't use those planer boards when there's a bunch of boats around, because you're going to end up having a problem. And of course, the guy that's running the planer boards goes, he didn't see my planer board. What the heck, not just paying attention. And the other guy's going, I had no idea. But, and so you just got to be aware, because people, when the salmon start biting in a certain area, there's a lot of boats in there, and you just got to be a little bit, with downriggers, you don't have to be so careful, but with your dipsy divers, you got a lot of line out there, and you got to make sure that sometimes it's recommended probably you don't run those things if you think you're going to cause an issue with getting somebody get your line. Because if they go right behind you, say 30 or 40 yards, 50 yards, with a downrigger, it's not a problem. But with a dipsy diver with all that line out, that could create a problem.
Right. Well, and it's a new technique to Fort Peck. The people fishing don't even understand to look for those. You get back on the Great Lakes, that's kind of the norm. They know to stay away from each other back there. But on Fort Peck, they look at you like you have three heads when you come by with a planer board out. 'Cause it's a new thing.
It would be kind of neat to have a symbol, like, for example, you put a flag up or something on your boat that, okay, I'm running planer boards, and that's the
right.
So then you start looking for them because when I'm not
a bad idea.
I just about T-boned a guy out there when I fell asleep, and Gary Reed was in the boat with me, and I had my back because you're watching the downriggers, and you're watching. I got that live scope position to show the back of the boat, so you're looking at that, and pretty soon I hear something, and I kind of wake up a little bit. I mean, it's long hours out there.
It is.
You get up at 4 o'clock in the morning for like 2 months in a row.
Yes,
and you got to take a nap sometime. And I just about. I turned around and went, what? And I'm trying to find my remote because I'm steering with my electric. Oh, man. And I did miss him.
I'll tell you a little story. Captain and I were out, and we were getting kind of tired. And he says, Rigger, take over. I'm going to take a nap. Oh, yeah, you bet, Cap. So I'm driving along, and I fell asleep too.
Yes.
He had no idea. I woke up and I'm really close to hitting the dam. I'm like, oh crap. Dang near ripped the downrigger off.
Right.
And Captain kind of wakes up. What's going on? Oh, nothing, Cap. Yeah, we're just making a little turn here.
Just checking out some new water.
Boy, I learned my lesson. If you are taking over, you got to get yourself awake and going. And that's one thing about the long day of fishing with salmon. And I know a lot of you like to have a few beers, and that not recommended.
No, yeah, salmon fishing is a different deal
because you're going to get tired.
Oh,
and
it's usually 95 to 100 degrees out there. You're dealing with the black flies. It's just it's tough situation, but the reward is worth it. It's absolutely incredible when you catch those fish.
So let's talk a bit about the actual catching part. And that's another thing that, like you said, you don't want to lose one once you've got that guy on. And that's a technique in itself, is knowing how to bring these fish in and how to keep that tension on that. Talk a bit about that.
Well, and that's the hardest part. Last year we had a lot of fish that were very acrobatic. I mean, and it's fun.
Jumping out of the water. Yeah.
But when they're 350 or 400 feet from the boat and they're coming out of the water with all that slack line, it is so hard to hold on to those fish. And you're right. The biggest thing you can do is when a fish hits is I tell people, you just get a hold of the rod and just let that fish run. Those runs on those kings are absolutely amazing to me. It's just it's crazy. And you don't know if they're going to peel 100 feet off or if they're going to peel 300 feet off. So I just tell people, just hold on to the rod. Don't try to reel. Don't do anything. Just let that fish run.
And keep that tip up.
Yep. Keep it up and just keep good tension on it. When that fish finally decides he's going to slow down, you just have to start reeling. You have to keep good tension on that fish. If he goes to run again, you just let him do his thing. But what I see a lot of people out there do is they try to horse these fish back to the boat really fast.
I got to get him in.
Yeah.
I want to keep that fish,
Yeah. The best thing you can do is let that fish play himself out. If a big salmon comes to the boat green, it's a train wreck. Yeah. Because you've got downriggers in the water. You've got everything going on, and pretty soon he's bouncing all over the place. And that's where you probably lose, I would say, 50% of your fish is bringing that fish to the boat green. Let him be tired when he gets to the net.
And then that netting situation, that puts some pressure on you, doesn't
Oh,
it?
as a guide, that's the biggest pressure there is when we're salmon fishing, because we fished all day for that one fish, and these fish are going nuts, and that's always in my brain is if I screw this up, they're gonna push me out of the boat.
But I mean, folks, you would not believe the power of a 20-pound salmon. You think, well, 20 pounds, they have the advantage on you.
They're solid muscle,
Yeah.
and they're so packed with Cisco and protein, and it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, and so now when you butcher this big salmon for your clients, because these are all keepers, they're going to die anyway.
Exactly, it's a different breed. Yep.
So now, how do you go about that and packing it ready, so the client can take that great salmon home?
So we usually, depending on the size of the fish, of course, we'll flay them out, take all the rib bones out, and then, a lot of the clients, like them, cut up into steaks. They're so big, and then we can get them in bags for them and get them right on ice. But one thing, I see a lot of people do this as well. We're fishing out there. It's hot. The surface temps are, high 70s a lot of times. They'll throw those fish in the live well, and they'll be in that hot water all day. That's not helping, the taste and the flavor of these fish. So what we do is immediately when we catch a king is we'll get that fish in the boat and we'll bleed them out. You cut their gills, let that fish bleed out, which I believe makes for a better tasting fish.
Without a doubt,
and we do that with all our fish that we're going to keep and eat. Doesn't matter what species it is, they all get bled out, and then immediately get that fish on ice. It doesn't hurt that fish at all. It can be in the ice, stay nice and cold. It'll cool down. And then at the end of the day, when you flay that fish out, it's perfect.
So at that point, you got it. But yeah, I agree. I've seen people do that. They treat it like it's a walleye or whatever, and you toss it in the live well. Well, a lot of these won't even fit in your live well.
Right.
But bad idea.
Yeah, they're
Bleed 'em
coming out of,
get them on ice.
52 to 55 degree water down there. They don't do well in that. They'll die right away. And then, it's not a good thing.
Now, that is an absolute thrill, folks. I definitely hope you'll book some time with Scott to try this salmon fishing. But there's a lot of other species out there that, Fort Peck is known for those walleye and that. What are some of the other species that you go out and fish for with your clients?
Probably the next most sought after species in Fort Peck are the lake trout. Excuse me. We don't have the giant lakers like, say, Flathead does, or some of these other lakes out of the state of Montana. If you truly get a 20 to 25 pound lake trout out of Fort Peck, you've got a giant.
Yeah.
But I feel that we've probably got the best average size and numbers of probably any lake around. It's pretty amazing. I've fished with a lot of guys that have fished all over the world, and they say the same thing. They come to Fort Peck and catch the numbers of fish we catch, and our average size is starting to go down a little bit. We've seen a lot of increased pressure on the lake trout in Fort Peck. There's still a great population of them, but we're definitely, a lot of these fish get kept because people like to smoke them and can them. But I truly think we're starting to see a little bit of a decline in the average size, but we're still way above average when it comes to it. And, you're still catching a lot of the 8 to 16, 17 pound fish. I mean, that's a great age class, but we're also starting to see more and more of like the 2 to 6 pounders, which for 20 some years, we hardly ever saw those fish. So we know they're reproducing, we know they're growing, but lake trout are such a slow growing fish. It takes forever for them to get big.
Right. But what I like about the lake trout and what you do as a guide, and a lot of the guides on Fort Peck do this, if your clients get a little tired with the hunt of the salmon or even with walleye, and they say, I just want to have some fun and catch some fish, you take them for the lake trout, because you're going to pretty much catch those.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's very few days that the lake trout go so negative that you can't catch them, especially later in the summer. Like you said, lake trout have saved my bacon more than once. I'm not going to lie. A tough day of fishing, and we can usually salvage that day by going and beating up on a bunch of lake trout. And they're big fish and fun.
And a lot of fun because you're jigging for them. You've got that light tackle.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a lot of fun.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It'll wear your arm out pretty fast.
Yeah. So you've got the lake trout. Now, what would be, say, the third thing that a client's going to look for?
a lot of people do still come to Fort Peck to fish the pike. So I get a lot of requests for that very big pike in this lake, and just lots of decent sized fish. But we're starting to see, me personally, more of a decline of people wanting to chase other species than northerns. There's still the diehard guys. The one species that we're starting to see a little bit of a increase in, pressure on is the smallmouth. But, Smallies, nobody ever talks about what a smallmouth fishery Fort Peck is. And
it's incredible.
It ranks right up there in the top of the world. I mean, it ranks right with Lake Erie and all those lakes back there. I mean, we're seeing a lot of fish, in that 4 to 6.5, 7 pound range, and I shouldn't say a lot of the 7 pound range, but, the 4 to 6.5 is pretty common.
And what I like about going out for the smallies, and again, you got to know where to go and that, so a guide can get you there. It can get like a circus.
Yes,
it can. When you get into them,
it.
Those fish are crazy.
They are.
They just go nuts. So what's the technique? What do you do for smallies? Mostly all jigging then?
Yeah, majority of the time it's jigging, or especially early in the year. And we've had some great day smallie fishing this year. And we haven't really even targeted them. The nice part is you're usually picking those up while you're pitching jigs for, walleye and pike and stuff. But a little bit later here in the season, big smallmouth are a sucker for a leech. And you put a leech under a slip bobber and hold on. Yeah. If you can get an area that's holding big smallies, they'll almost always take a leech on a hook.
But they're a crazy fish. Remember, Captain, we had Jim that time from when back he had the jerky company there in Lincoln, and we were doing some walleye, but we got into smallies, and he took a break and he just had his rod laying there, and the lure was just kind of in the water.
Yep.
The dang smallie hits it and damn near lost the rod.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just nuts.
Right.
And talk about, you better use your retrieve all the way to the boat, because they will grab right at the end of the retrieve.
Yeah, they're not scared of anything, it doesn't seem like. Well, one of the things that happened to us last spring, and we almost got it all on video. We got the majority of it, but we had some clients that are great people. They're out of Helena. They come fish with me all the time. And we were just outside of Rock Creek, and we were trying to target smallies. They wanted to catch a few, and we hooked about a 3.5 pound smallie, and it's coming to the boat, and it gets right to the boat, and it jumps out of the water like they do, like you say. It's just a circus, and this thing's going bananas on the surface. Well, all of a sudden it kicks out about a 4-inch minnow. It looked like probably a spot tail shiner, and that spot tail takes off swimming, and we're like, oh, it's free. Can you believe that? It made it about 10 feet, and a smallie come out of nowhere and just inhaled that. It's like, well, it wasn't his day. He was free for about 10 more seconds, but it was so funny, they're such an aggressive fish.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
I thought you were going to say that an eagle came down and swooped. Poor guy.
Another thing that was weird, because those smallies can turn on and then they can just shut off.
Yeah.
We were fishing, remember, Captain, there was a couple on a point, and they were laughing and they were just catching smallies like crazy. We'd had kind of a tough walleye day, and they said, hey, we're getting tired. If you guys want our spot, they're just going like hell. So remember, we went over there.
Well, we try to do that with every time we go fishing. Somebody else is catching fish. We try to just hang out there, and if they'll give us their spot, we're happy.
That's the Captain Monkey See, Monkey Do technique. But remember, so they graciously give us their spot. So we get in there, we're like ready for the big smallie circus. Dead. Nothing. Didn't catch a one. We're like, what are we doing wrong? That's Fort Peck fishing.
It is 100%.
Well, Scott, this has been just a great discussion with you, and I appreciate all your time. So I'll put your links and all that. What's the best way? What is the way you prefer if somebody wants to book with you to contact you? Is it calling you then?
Yeah, call. And that's the hard part. We've got so much going on.
Okay,
I like the calls better. But it just usually takes me a little while to get back to people.
So leave a message on the answering deal.
And usually, somebody in the tackle store will answer, and I've got a notebook. They leave me messages on who to call back and stuff like that. And yeah, it's probably the best way to get a hold of me that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then how far in advance should they be booking? You book up pretty quick.
Very quick, like it's amazing to me. Every year is getting, busier and busier. And, yeah, it's amazing to me. Like I don't have one day left for the entire season.
Wow.
I'm booked solid all the way to September 1 and, which is incredible. But we're getting so many people that, really want these last minute trips, especially, the salmon people, it kind of, they want to wait and see if the fish are going to be biting. And I get that, but at that point it's too late.
Yeah.
But, cause most all of us that are guiding up here in the same boat,
everybody's
booked up pretty solid.
So a good thing for them to do is book for next season.
Yes.
Then.
Yeah.
Do it now.
I used to really wait, until next year, but I finally started taking bookings,
Okay.
And hopefully if things go right, we'll have a few more guides working out of the marina next year. So we'll be able to accommodate a lot more people.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, you have cancellations once in a while.
We
for
do, yes.
Various reasons. And I noticed like on your Facebook page, you will promote that and say, hey, I just got 2 openings on this date, such and such. And so that's one way. But also if you're flexible, a lot of people are retired nowadays.
Yeah.
It seems like anyway. Then maybe just if you're ready to go when Scott calls you and you get a couple of days coming down, I mean, that's the other way to do it as well. But I can't emphasize enough the knowledge that you can get just by stopping in early in the morning. Go there, and salmon guys are notoriously early, 6 o'clock in the morning when he opens, and you can get some conversation going with him. He'll tell you who he heard caught fish, where they're catching them. And, salmon guys aren't like walleye guys. They'll tell you where they're
we
catching
stick
them.
Together. You gotta do it.
Where the walleye guys go, hey, I caught him in the lake, that type of deal.
Yeah. Right.
And I can't believe how good the bass fishing is. And I can't believe how disappointed I am when I catch a bass when I'm fishing for walleye. I go, crap, it's a smallmouth bass. And it's a big one too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I don't care about the fight. I care about the food.
There you go.
Well, and if you've seen the captain, you know that he cares about the food because he's getting to be a captain and a half here. Anyway, anything else you want to add before we go here, Scott?
I don't think so. I think we covered just about everything.
Yeah. Well, and again, I can't stress enough. If you want to learn, this is a big lake. You could go, if you wanted to go alone and learn this lake, you could go a year and never catch a thing.
Yes.
So how much gas are you going to burn? How much tackle are you going to go through trying to figure it out when you can just go out with a guide and they're going to teach you. And they don't mind to teach you.
No.
That's what they do. So
I've actually had a lot of guys hire me to not even catch fish, but to go out and learn how to read a fish finder.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done that where we've spent.
Yeah, you learn the electronics. Yeah.
That's a big deal to some people. They want to get better at it,
Especially this new electronics. All the I don't even know half of it, but it's becoming a big advantage.
Oh, it is.
To learn it,
Yep.
it takes time. Well, you can cut that time way down by getting with a guide and spending some time.
Yes,
I mean, it's
definitely.
your time. You'll teach them. So
Well, and I know just to touch on one thing on that, Rigger, back when I was younger, we went to a lot of different lakes. I was fortunate enough that we traveled a lot, fished a lot of different lakes, and we had talked about hiring a guide when we went to some of these lakes, but of course our egos were like, we're big fishermen. We can figure this out.
I know how to fish.
Yeah, and I look back now and we would have been so much further ahead, and I started doing that. Like we just did a trip to Lake Havasu, in March where we went down to target those reddier, and that first thing we did was hire a guide, break that learning curve down. I don't mind that. We've done it on about 7 or 8 different lakes now where when we go there, that's exactly what we're doing. You need to understand the techniques, what we're looking for, where these fish are living. And instead of taking maybe 4, 5, 6 days of the whole trip or not even learning it at all, we go with the guide for a day and
Now
we
you're
get it
having
dialed
fun.
in.
Yeah.
And then, and that's one thing I won't do is I won't go back to his exact spots because I know he's with clients in there the next day.
Yeah.
But at least now we know the structure to look for. We can take our map and sit in the
Exactly.
boat and say, okay, this is what we're looking for. And we target different areas of the lake. And we've been very successful doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just such a great way to do this. And then the neat thing is you've got another whole fishery in your book of tricks.
Yes.
So you can say, hey, you know what? Let's run over to Fort Peck, and you can fish Fort Peck now.
Yeah, you've got confidence that you can go over there
Right.
and have a good trip.
Well, I hope you folks will do it. Again, in the podcast description, you're going to see links for Scott's website, for his Facebook page. You're going to have all the phone numbers in there and all that. And by all means, that's what they're there for. Get on and learn about it. Get your name on the list if you want to book for a cancellation this season, if that comes up, or get on the list so you can get that call back for the next year and get those bookings ready to roll. So I hope you do it. You're going to have a lot of fun with Scott Collinsworth out here on Fort Peck. And so there you have it, folks. I hope you had some fun learning about this incredible fishery and about the whole idea of learning from guides. As we go along here on the podcast, I'm going to have other guides from other areas on as well. And hopefully by the end of the summer, we're going to show you a lot of places to go in Montana and have some fun. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.